Hello everyone. So today we're going to make some slab cups like this guy right here and using this stamp. So I have this stamp right here that I laser cut and then I use that to make this cup. All right, so my name is John. I've been teaching ceramics about 20 some years now. Off and on, I've been traveling I traveled all over the place. I worked in Florida, Massachusetts. Right now I live in Portland, Oregon, and that's where I work from. And I teach at Mount Hood Community College. So down in the comments, why don't you tell us where you're from? Like, I assume there's going to be people from all over the place watching this video. So in the comment section, put where you're watching this from. Also, during this, if you have any questions or would like to just make a comment, just put your name and put your comment in there, and I'll respond to you. All right, so let's make some cups. So when we look at this here, I have already cut out a slab here, so you can see that, and it's about the right size. And underneath that slab is a sheet of newspaper because I don't want it to stick, and it's a little bit hard to see, and it's on a wooden board. All right, so what I do here is I will make this slab. I already have my laser cut stamp right here. Right, and that will be used to make an impression on the slab. And then here you can see some other types of cups that I make using different stamps that I've laser cut. Right, and this is another version of the one you just saw. Here's another one. So these are all just similar versions of different things. But today, right now, we're going to use this guy right here. I really love this stamp. It's going to be awesome. So here we go. So first thing that I do is I have my slab cut out already. And then what I do is I'll just trace this around this guy. And I want the slab to be about exactly the right size to fit this slab. So what I'll do here is I'll use my thing. My Dolan cutter tool, which is incredibly awesome. Put that over there. I'll cut this here. Right here. Right there. So I've trimmed off the excess there. And let's see here. I'll put that in there. And then, so now this slab is already now just about the right size. You'll see that. So if you put this on here, it's exactly the right size. And we'll explain why I need it or why I like it that way here in a minute. And so then what I'm going to do here is I put cornstarch on there because this is such a big stamp that it sticks to the slab sometimes. So what I'm going to do is put cornstarch on there to dry out that surface of the clay, to keep it from sticking after I stamp it. Because this is such a big stamp, a lot of times and then there's texture on the wood a little bit, and when it gets stamped, sometimes it will stick down for basically forever, and I can't peel it back off. So I cornstarch that a little bit, and then I'll kind of rub this down. Okay. There we go. So just to get a closer look at how these cups look, this is a bisque version, right, from that stamp. You see that? So it still has a little bit of cleanup that I need to do to it, right? That's the bisque version, has a handle and everything on it. And then this is the raw stamp. So let's get a close-up look at that stamp. You can see that. And there we go. Looks pretty good. All right, so now we're just going to take this. So the cornstarch, this will keep it from sticking down. There we go. So now that powder has dried out the surface, and then I'll flip this guy around and put it now face down on top of there. And I center it up just so that the edges are lined up. This little circle here is a little target that I use when I take it to the press, and I'll show you that here in a second. So now what I use is, if I didn't have the shop press, which I usually just take some sort of mallet and will hit this down to get the impression. But what I use over here is a shop press. So let's go over and show you what I use to press this to make the stamp come out really even. So here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bend this camera around so you can see where I'm about to go. So that's my shop press. So that's what I use to stamp this guy down. So here we go. Bring this over, and it's sitting on this board here, and I bring it over. And then, so you can see there's a little spindle right here. And that spindle, I want to line that spindle up to the center of my stamp. So let's bring this up. Let's take a look. Right, so that the stamp stamps more evenly. So I use this little right angle thing to make sure it's in the middle. I'm going to push this back a little. There we go. All right, so that's in the middle. And then just because the spindle will get in the way, what I do is I put these metal plates on there, which will help distribute out the pressure, because this brings down so much pressure that it will crack my board no problem. So I put that on there like that. And then because the spindle is there, I actually put these two guys on there like that. So it took me a while to kind of work out this system, but it's pretty effective. And then I just bring the thing down. So you can see that right now I'm doing the little thing, and then the thing is slowly going down. Sorry for the noise. There we go. So now it's in contact. There, so now it's in contact. Now I need to use this guy here and begin to put some pressure down on it. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. So now if you get close, you can see that the stamp now, it's beginning to stamp. So you see how the clay now is starting to come out from around the edge here? So that's because the stamp, right, has been pushed down, and then that clay is starting to squirt out the sides, and that's what I want to see. And it's doing it on the back side, and let's see if it's doing it all the way around. So it looks like it's doing a little bit on the side too. I'm going to give it one more push and we'll call it good. There we go. So I'm happy with that. So that's the reason why I trim the clay off exactly the same size as the stamp, because that way I know when the clay is squirted out, I've gotten enough pressure on and I've gotten a good impression, because that means the stamp is pushed down and squashed the clay out. So that means hopefully now when I pull this up, it's left a good impression. So we'll pull this back now. So if that guy goes up, and this is a shop press I got at Harbor Freight, pretty cheap. And it's been working well for years. Exactly what I need to do. And it's pretty light duty work for what this needs to do. All right, so now this is ready to come back to what I want to do. Let's bring it back so we can see what's going on. There we go. All right, so now I have that like this. So now what I'm going to do is trim the edges off of this stamp. So, because I don't need that clay. I don't want any of this extra clay on there. I use my handy dandy little knife. This is a Dolan tool. I absolutely love this tool. There. I'll cut this off here. I'll cut this off over here. There we go. Cut this off over here. There we go, like that. So that should be fairly cut off. I want to make sure I get it pretty flush, because this board is exactly the right size. So for me, this is 11.2 inches wide, and I think it's about 5 inches tall. And that will get me this size cup exactly, and that's what I like. I like this size cup. All right, so I've trimmed it up, and then I'll just flip it over and peel off the newspaper. There we go, newspaper's off. Sometimes some of this newspaper gets left behind. I like newspaper a lot for this because it doesn't do this that much. I found that when I use copy paper, this happens a lot more, like just regular 8.5 by 11 paper. So usually this newspaper just comes right off, but this is no, but sometimes it sticks a little, shreds up a little bit like this. There we go, comes off. Awesome. All right, so throw that away. All right, so now I'm ready to bevel my edges. So I bevel my edges on both sides so that what I want is a nice clean attachment that's the same thickness all the way across. I know there are a lot of different ways you can attach your seam, but that's what I like to do. So for that, I like to use this tool here. And this is one that I got while I was in Kentucky, while I was teaching in Kentucky. It's a really great tool. And then what I do is I use this guy here. And so what am I doing here? What I am doing here is I'm going to stagger this guy back just a little bit. So you see that, how I set that guy back about that much from the edge. And then what I'm going to do here is I'll take this tool here and use this angle. So I'm going to use the shallow angle like that and put it up, put this piece of wire against the edge of that, and I'll scrape along the edge, and that will give me a nice even cut. The reason why I need this is because this edge here is like this edge here. There's certain parts, if you look, there's certain parts that are cut down and up, down and up. If I just jam this up against the side here, that wire is going to get caught, hung up on the up and down that goes along there. So I'm just going to stagger that back. And so then instead of the wire running along, going up and down on that, the wire is going to run along this metal edge right there. So I'll point this camera down so it can get a good view of that. Let me switch, give me a second, let me switch this view. There we go. So now you can see that, right there. So you can see it step back a little bit, and then I'll use that edge right there to cut this off. So that looks about right. So you see I'm staggered back a little bit. It's usually about the same thickness of the slab that the slab is. That's a good guesstimation. So what I'll do is I'll pull this way once, and I go about halfway, and then I stop. And then what I'll do is I'll come back and go this way with the tool, because if I just run this tool all the way out, because I put that powder on there earlier, the cornstarch, it has a tendency to rip out. So I go back the other way. There we go. So now that has a beautiful, perfect bevel. And then I'm just going to flip the slab over, and I have to peel it off this guy. So in a lot of ways, this is kind of like the moment of truth, right? So I'm just going to see if I can just peel this guy up. Ooh, it's coming off really nice and beautifully. Nice and easy there. And then now let's just look at what it looks like. So you can see that is just turned out really beautiful. Look at that. Beautiful impression that it made. Looks really good. And then you can see how it looks compared to the original stamp. Ooh, nice. All right, so I'm done with the stamp for now. That goes to the side. And then I do the same thing that I just did on that side that I do again over here. I'll put a bevel down again. So I'll push this off to the side a little bit just to give myself some more room. And I'll cut this side right here, right? And I do the same angle, same direction, because I flipped it. So if you look here, this angle here is undercut this way, like that, right? And I want to do the same cut over here. So cut it like that. And then this tool just means that I just don't have to really think about the angle at all. I just do about the same amount back from the edge again. Make the cut. And then I do the same thing going back the other way. There we go. Beautiful. All this stuff will get recycled later. And then, so now we're almost ready to put the edge together. So here we go. This one is going to get scored up. Oh, Kathy, thank you. So I have 3 cameras running right now. So I need to find my scoring tool. Here we go. So this is just a simple little scoring tool that I have. So here, there we go. Score, 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 score. So I just score it right now because it's easier to score now because it's more stable. So it's against the board. There we go. And I'll put that guy aside. And then I'm going to just get it up into a cylinder form. So I use a smaller cylinder than what is needed. So here, this is the cylinder right here. So I use this smaller cylinder. This is a 2.5-inch cylinder. This could fit, this is about big enough to fit for a 3.5-inch cylinder about, but I used a smaller cylinder because this helps prevent warping later. So let's do that. So I'll just pick this guy up and then I just roll it up onto the cylinder. So I just kind of pick it up. The whole deal is for to handle this whole thing as gently as possible the whole time. So I'm picking it up into the air and I wrap it around like that. And then you can see that I overlap it, the wrapping, I totally overlap it. So you can see how that is going over that. So this cylinder right now is much smaller than what the final cup is going to be. And so by doing that, I'm trying to give the clay memory, right, of itself, trying to counteract the flat memory that it has. Because if I just roll it up into a cylinder that's the right size, the cup has a tendency to warp and push flat out the seam. So right here is the seam, has a tendency to squash. The cylinder has a tendency to go more football shape this way and that way. So by wrapping this in a tighter circle, that helps kind of get rid of that memory of the clay being flat, and it helps give it a new memory of it being round. So now I put it on a bat because the rest of this work is going to be spin on here, and it's going to be spinning. All right, so now I am ready to work on attaching the sides of this together. So here we go. We pull this guy out for a second. And now I have this side scored right here. I didn't score this other side. I find that I don't have to. It's fine. This loves to be attached just like this already. So now I'm just going to add slip to just one side. I just add slip to the side that's already ready to go. So here I have my slip made up already. And it's just a little bit thick, but it's okay. It's the same clay. This is a cone 6 like B-mix type. This clay is actually called Christy Lombard. She's an artist here in Oregon. And so it's very much like B-mix, except it has a little bit more tooth and it's a little bit tougher than B-mix. So it's just better. We started using it at school. It's because it's really good for student use. And so it's just like B-mix with just a little bit of grog or sand, fine sand or something. So it just has a little bit more fight to it. And I know there's B-mix with sand and B-mix with grog. Both of those are very good too. All right, so I goobered that up and then I'm going to push these two together. Right, and what I do when I push these guys together, I don't push it together all at once. I coax it together slowly. So what I'm doing here is I just push it a little bit and a little bit. I try not to get one side more finished than any other place. So you see right here is the most open. So I'll push that together. It's kind of a gentle process. And then because I want that seam to be an even thickness all the way, you'll see that I'm lining up those two bevels together. You see that? So I'm trying to line up those bevels so that they line up together. So there, so you can see how those bevels are lining up almost exactly. Yeah, so yes, mine always want to ovalize too at the attachment, right? So by overbending it, by making it a much smaller circle when you start and then opening it up and then attaching it, that will help keep it from ovalizing so much. Okay, that's the issue. That's one of the issues that I was fighting for a long time. So, and that has helped out so much. And so here, it's almost attached, right? So here I'm attaching slowly, attaching slowly, attaching slowly. So now it's pretty much in contact. You see all the way up and down. There's a few places that are have gaps, but it's almost attached all the way around. So now I feel like I'm ready to start kind of pushing. Because this has a design right all over the surface, right? You see how it has that design? I don't really want to really push down too hard. I just want to take it easy here. And so whatever I end up with, I kind of end up with. I can't just jam down super hard. So here I'll use a piece of foam that I kind of ball up into a kind of a wad. So this is just a piece of memory foam from someone's old bed from a long time ago. And I just kind of wad it up into a blob. And I use that to press against this cylinder that's wrapped in paper on the inside. So here I push. So it's super gentle, right? Because by doing it this way, I'm just kind of clumsy and klutzy with my hands. I want to push and I leave dents all over my clay and I end up mad and I go home and I feel worthless at night or whatever. If I do it this way, it just makes my life so much better and I feel more well-adjusted and all that. I feel happier, like a happier person because I don't damage that beautiful, like I worked so hard to make that design. So that's about all I get to do there. You see that? And so that seam will always kind of just be there. I'm okay with that. If you want your seam to be invisible, you have to do something else, right? If you also notice that the way I made the stamp, right? If you see that my design kind of stops halfway there, and then this design kind of starts halfway here. But if you look at it, when I do my cuts, you see that my design carries over to the other side. So I especially made that stamp. So the design continues from the seam over to from this side of the seam to the other side of the seam. All right, so the outside looks, oh, I actually didn't do a very good job here, so because I was talking too much. So let's push this down a little harder because you can see here that that seam is a little bit open. I know you got to focus in a little bit, but you can see there. See how the seam isn't quite pushed down all the way. So I'm going to push this down a little bit. So I'm going to use my fingers here and just try to be gentle. And I just don't like that very edge popped open. That just bothers me. And I don't want to try to fix it later. Now is the time to try to fix that. It's focusing on what's behind. There we go. It's focusing. So you see how that edge, it was just that very edge that was still open. You see that? So I'm just being, see how super gentle I'm being? I'm just being super gentle. There's a little bit there. Okay, so that's good. So now what we're going to do is I pull this guy out. Oop, it's still a little funny up here. So there's an issue here. So it feels like I just didn't goober enough slip in there, right? So it just feels like I didn't put enough slip, right? Like it's just maybe I'm talking too much or something. And so it got kind of dry right here, trying to make it so we could see it. So anyway, I opened it up and I'm going to goober some more slip into that spot. There we go. So I'm going to goober some more slip. I'm just holding this foam back there so you guys can see. So I just goobered more slip into there, and then I'm going to smash it back down, and that should attach it all. I never have an issue with this cracking. This joint works really good. Even though I only scored it from one side, these joints never come apart. Never is almost never, right? There are other places this will crack, but this joint is super strong. All right. So now I look at the inside. And so because I went through all that trouble and beveled the inner edge and all that, you see the inside is already looking pretty clean. And then my hands are kind of fat. I mean, not fat, but they're kind of wide and they're kind of short. So if you look at my hand, so I can't really effectively get my hand in there to clean that joint up. So I'm looking for my special secret tool to do this with. So my special high-tech tool is a stick with a sponge tied on the end, and I use that. But I also have a green scrubby for when I really need to get serious and I really need to scrub down. And then I get that sponge wet and I hold it against that edge there. And then I'll just use this sponge to kind of scrub at this for a little bit. And I actually don't do too much pressure. So my goal for myself is not to make this invisible. I don't care if it's slightly there. I just want it to be smooth and sealed and not look bad, right? So usually you can still I'm cleaning up because I could take the time and just really clean that seam up so that it is invisible, but I'm fine with it like that, right? So I'm fine with it as long as it looks, like that one. I never clean up either. That's it. I just make it look consistent. All right, so the cylinder is done. So now what I have to do is start thinking about the bottom. So I have all these bottoms, and what we do here for the bottom, what I like to do for the bottom is dun dun dun, put another design stamped on the bottom. There we go. So it matches that design. I cut a similar stamp to fit that. So, and then I actually have a few other designs that I use, but here are the ones that I'm using today. So these ones, believe it or not, are all slightly, if I lay them down, are all slightly different sizes because this is a hand-built cylinder. I want the one of these that fits perfectly on this cup here, on this base. So here we go. So I'm going to find one that fits. Let's see if this one fits really well. Let's get super close so that you guys can see it really well. And let's line it up. I know that you can see it from the overhead view, but this is much better because so you see how this one's too short when I line it up. Too short. Let's see about this one. Oh, too short as well. You see how it's not quite lining up? It's close. This one. Ooh, this one might. Oh, too short. Ooh, nope. Way too short. That one. So these are all within like a 1/10 of an inch, or not a 1/10 of, like even less than that, like half of a 1/10. Huh, none of those fit. Oh, this one's getting close. Okay, so not quite that one. Let's see here. Okay, so the bottom's a little bit bigger than all of these. Let me see here if I can find one that I think will work. So that's funny because I had one that I was just using that was working out great. So let's use this. No, that's not it. I must have lost it. All right, so that's what happens when you're working, right? You just set it down. So let's just go with that one. All right, so this one's close, and what I can do, it's a little bit bigger, but what I can do is like squash, kind of coax this side inward a little bit so it fits. Because what I love to do is this just lines up perfectly all the way around. So I'm pretty close right now. All right. So this is great. So, oh, I forgot to look. I forgot to check which side I actually wanted to do. So I'm going to put this side down because it's a little bit messier. This seam right here is not as good. And I'm going to fix that. Ooh, this seam isn't very good at all. It's very weak, so I need to add some slip into there. I didn't actually flip. I don't think I flipped it over to check this side, did I? Forgot. There we go. Mush that in. It's okay to have extra slip goobering out. That's fine. All right, so I want to round this. You see how unrounded that is? So I have a rounder that I use here. So this is just a thrown thing, but you can use a funnel for this part if you want to help make your pots more round. You could use a funnel, but I use this because these are ones I throw in the wheel, and I just pop it in there just for a second, and then you can see where it's not round because those parts won't be touching. So you can see there's light coming out from the inside. That's the place where it's not round, right? That's the place. And then you see where the places where it's touching, those are the parts that are going in. The place where there's lights coming out, that's where it's not round. So those are the places I need to push in more, is where there's light. So I don't push down on this, I push in from the side. Right, if you push down on it, you could break your piece. So this one's massive. There's a massive place that's out around. So I'll push that all in to make it work. There, let's see, push in, push in, push in. This one was really off, so it's taking me a little bit longer than normal. There we go. Remember, if you have any questions or anything, type them in. And you have any comments about anything, feel free to comment. There we go. So that's looking pretty round and much happier. The reason why I want this side down is because there's a little bit more unevenness here. Like my slab roller is not the best in the world. It's kind of old. It's seen some mileage. So you can see that it naturally sometimes leaves the slab like slightly thicker on one side than the other. So that often happens. And so I just put the side that's not as good facing downward because that's going to get covered up by that anyways. Here we go. So that's looking good. All right, so here we go. So now go back to this again. This is a little bit, so I'm going to put the biggest one of these down on there because it doesn't, this one seems the biggest. So I was just measuring these guys against each other. This one seems like the biggest one. So this is the one that we'll use. That's looking really good. So now I push this aside. So that's done for this second. And then I'm going to get out my other slab, because I need to cut out a slab for this. So here we go. Use this guy. I'm going to cut out a round disc here. Use my needle tool. Cut that out. There we go. Right, so set that aside. Put this guy away. Recycle my clay. Oh, so these stamps are, someone just wrote in the comments, like, where do these stamps come from? I have a laser cutter, so I design and cut my own stamps. And so, like, these come from drawings I do. These are all drawings that I've done, and then I scan them. This is something that I designed on just using Adobe Photoshop. And then, Illustrator. I had to teach myself how to use a software. And then, yeah, I learned how to do all that. Lots of fun. It's something that I'm teaching my students to do in class. And so they're doing the drawings. I scan them and help them clean it up. And then they get to use these stamps. All right. So that was a good question, Alex. So, oh, is that Alex from Emporia? All right, so here we're going to put this on. So this goes here, and once again, I'm going to use powder for this, the thing. like a thing like that. I'm going to put that on there because once again, it's going to be stamped under so much pressure that the pressure will make it stick. And then I use my hand to kind of spread that around to make sure it's dry. So really, so that's cornstarch that I'm using. And the cornstarch just helps it keep from sticking to the surface. All right, so here we go. So then I put this on, and this stamp also has that same target and back for the spindle. Okay, so then let me put this over here on this on that thing. Let's go back over to the hydraulic press. So this is the press again. So I get my little right angle thing and just try to make it into the right. So I want this directly under the spindle. So that's why I put that little round shape there, because I use this little right angle thing just to make sure it's lined up properly underneath there. Once again, I could do this just by hitting on it or leaning on it or something, but I like using this press because it gives me a really good constant pressure. So it's lined up, but I just know by experience I need to shove it just a little bit more that way just to make sure it's under. The press for some reason squashes that side out more. So I cheat it just a little bit further. And then I use this again. This time I just use this right there like that. And then it goes down there and I'll push it there and I push, push, push. There, that's plenty. Maybe one more. And I'll use this to release the pressure. There. And this comes out. And then let's bring this back and let's look at this. Now, so you can see that it looks that it's really good because that's why I cut it flush too. Remember how I cut this one flush with the edge of the stamp, right? But this time I can see how much, since it was flush, right? And then I squashed it, I can see that I got enough stamping done because I'm always afraid that I didn't stamp it enough. So that's why I leave that, cut that flush. Oh, great. Hello. So here then I'm just gonna trim the outside of this guy off right here. So I spin around, trim that outside off, go all the way around. There we go. So that outside now is off. So now I have one that's flush all the way around with my disc. Good. Here we go. So now that is flush all the way around. And then I'm going to put a bevel on this using my bevel cutter, which disappeared. I set it down somewhere and now it's gone. Oh, here it is. So this time I'm going to use, when I cut the edge for my cup, right, I used this way. I held it like this and I used that edge. This time I'm going to go vertical. So I want the shortest bevel on this disc that I can. So I go vertically here and I just jam it in there and make that cut all the way around. Woo-hoo. There. So I keep the disc on here for as long as possible because I don't want to handle this, because as long as this is stuck on there, I can't damage that surface that I put it on. Okay, so I leave it on there for as long as I can. So I'm going to set that aside for a second and bring my cup back into play. So if you remember where we were, so I've made my cylinder, right? And I decided that this side is going to be the side that the bottom is going to be attached to, because I like the other side better. So this side, and then I'm going to re-round it again with my rounder like that, and we'll go back down so you guys can see that. So I'm just trying to push this to make this as round as possible. There we go. There we go. Awesome. Then what we're going to do is we're going to score it. And of course I lost my scoring tool already. So it's kind of odd, like how could something like that disappear? I'm going to score this up really neatly as I can. And I only score this side. I don't score the disc side at all. There. So I'm going to check the roundness. Looks okay. I'm going to re-round it one more time just because I just want it to be really good. So one more time round. Okay, looks good. And then I'll goober up with slip, attaching slip. Oh God, that was a lot. There we go. Goober. And this slip is maybe just a little bit harder, or I mean, not as wet as it usually is. It's a little bit goopy today. So I really goober that up really good. And then what I'm going to do is this disc, right? This disc is still there, right? It's still attached to this guy, right? So I just kind of plop it on there just to see, just like that. And I just will go around to make sure it's in the middle all the way around. So that doesn't feel that round. So I can shift it around because it's still a little bit wet. And now I'm going to put downward pressure on here by tapping all the way around. Because I want this disc to get stuck onto here enough so that I could pull this piece of wood off. So what I'm trying to do is get it so that the clay now wants to stick to the clay more than it wants to stick to the wood. So I go around and I just tap it. I go around a few times, tap, 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 tap. Tap, 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 tap. And now hopefully it is stuck down onto here more than it is stuck to the piece of wood. There we go. And it pops right off. So now I have my design right from my stamp transferred from here onto there. And then now all I have to do is attach it. And what I want, the reason why I beveled that edge, you see that edge bevel is right there, right? That edge bevel is right there. I want to pound that edge downward to create the bevel that I want out of this. So here, we're going to use a paddle here. We're just going to paddle the edge. So I always start at the seam because that way I know how many times I've gone around. So I'm just going to paddle this edge. And I have to go around a couple of times. So you can see here that it seems like this edge is sticking out just a little bit too much. I sometimes will cheat that edge in a little because it sometimes isn't cooperating. So I'll go around, push, 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 push. This edge you see is sticking out a little. I'll push that edge in a little just to make sure that it's round as possible. There we go. So now I've gone once around and I'll go around at least one more time. There we go. So I've gone around twice. So that's enough for that. And then I'm going to smooth it out with my rubber rib now. So here, smooth, smooth, smooth. And then all this slip. Now I'm really trying to scrape off that extra slip. I'm looking for a pretty clean attachment, like so you can't even tell that attachment happened. So I am rubbing around here. And because I'm doing all this rubbing and smoothing at this, some of that rubbing happens going onto that vertical surface. So that's why on my stamp, I leave this part blank. There's about 1/4 inch of blank space on top and on the bottom, so that I have room to clean up my rim and clean up my bottoms. So my stamp doesn't interfere, so I don't have to worry about mashing up my beautiful texture. All right, so that's looking smooth enough for now. I'll go back and re-smooth that when it's leather hard. And then I flip it over, and right now I have that slip on the inside. So let's get a look at the inside of this bad boy. So you can see that there's a little bit of extra slip that squishes out on the inside. And so what I use is this tool right here, and this is one of those rubber tip tools that that's square at the end. You see that? And so what I'll do is I'll stick that tool down there and run it around the seam right there, and that picks up all the extra slip and just smooths that edge out really quick. And I want that edge to look as clean as possible as I can. So I'll do it one more time. Go around the edge on the inside, clean it all up. Awesome. Look at that. So I'm pretty excited. That's the way I want it to look. Super clean like that. I don't add a coil or anything. This seam, this joint is usually really good, almost 100% of the time. So there. And then if I do need to clean up, let's say it's got beat up on the inside a little bit. If it's near the top, I need to scrub at it. I'll use my sponge here and I'll scrub at it for a while. If it's something where I need to if it's something small, I'll use this. And if it's near the bottom, I can scrub at it like that. You see that? So that's looking pretty good here. Let's re-round it. And then that's it for right now for these guys. Right, and then what we're going to do here is, let's see, so that's pretty round, so I'm pretty happy. So what this needs to do is, this needs to sit for a little bit to get dry. So this is a lot drier than a thrown piece. So, and these can dry out even a little bit faster than thrown pieces. So what I did was I made one about an hour ago, and let's attach a handle onto this guy, right? So this has only been sitting out for maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours. So it is dry enough that I can pick it up and I can work on it. Maybe it's a little wetter than what I would normally want, but oh, I forgot one more thing. I forgot one last step. So I've done, but the bottom right now is flat. So what I want to do is take this little disc here and make it dome the bottom upward. So I do this and I do this here, and I'll dome this guy upwards like that. So I kind of like drop it on there a little bit. There you go. So now that upside is going up and in right there. You see that? And then that creates a nice even dome. And then sometimes if I'm feeling good, I will roll the edge very lightly. I'll roll it just like that. But a lot of times just the weight of this cup will roll it too hard and mash the edge too much. So a lot of times when I'm rolling, I am actually picking the cup up and lifting the pot up in the air a little bit. So it's not rolling too hard, right? If I let the weight of the cup roll this, it will smash that edge. And then, so I want a nice, beautiful, clean edge, a nice, smooth, happy transition. When I glaze this, if I feel like it, sometimes I leave the bottoms unglazed, but sometimes I'll glaze them. And then I can run the glaze pretty close to that edge right there. All right, so let's stick a handle. Let's clean this guy up, right? So this is the one I made just a little bit ago today, and you can see it's looking pretty good. So when I clean these up, first of all, I always start with the rounding, right? So I always have to let it sit for a couple hours at least. So I always re-round it. And then I'm going to round the rim, which I need my Sureform tool to do that. Here we go. Round, 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 round the outside. There we go. Round the outside. That's enough of that. And then I'll take a metal rib or something and I'll clean up the inside with this. I can just scrape the inside with this tool here, because the Sureform doesn't really fit inside of this. There we go. So now I got the rim kind of rounded, and then I'll come back with, so this clay is soft enough, I think I can get away with this and just use that to help finish rounding that rim off. Right, so I'm just trying to create a nice, beautiful rim. Because remember, this is the place that people are going to interact with your pot most intimately, right? So people actually have to kiss this area, right? So if you look around where you are, right, would you stick this in your mouth, right? Would I stick this in my mouth? No. Would I stick this in my mouth? But I definitely would stick this in my mouth, right? And this rim could have gone a lot of the same places that this had, but I don't really think about it. I just would drink out of it. Right, so as a potter, I feel a responsibility to make this a very nice and happy place for people. So I make the rims, trying to make the rim all nice and smooth. So I've rounded the rim, and then I'll come back with a sponge, which is, here it is. So I'll come back with a sponge and just scrub at it now to help clean that up. There we go. So that's looking much happier. It got a little bit unround, so I'm very into keeping it round. So I'll mash it down and try to keep it round. Right, just doing the same thing. So I'll always keep coming back to this and re-rounding because I'm kind of paranoid. So if you look at the edge, the wooden stamp that I use leaves a little bit of texture behind. I sometimes take the sponge and then I just smooth all that out. You see that texture right there? Sometimes I leave it. So today we're just going to leave it. And that means, so I always work from the top down, right? If I need to do something on the inside, I would start with the inside, but it looks pretty good this time. So I'm just going to leave it. That's leftover powder from the cornstarch. I leave that too. And then here now that takes me to the bottom. So I'll work the bottom a little bit. This bottom looks pretty good. So I don't have to do much to this. I'll maybe just clean it up a little bit like that all the way around. The bottom of anywhere is the part that got worked the most. So it oftentimes has some cleanup that has to happen, but that looks pretty good. This one is looking pretty good. Now this is a little wet. So you see how it already ovalized just by me tipping it over and stuff, but we're going to re-round it here. And now let's stick on a handle. So for these cups, I like using an extruded handle. So let's look at this one again. So this is a handle that's on there right there. So that's the kind of handle that we're going to put on. So magical, right? I have a box of handles ready to go. So what I don't like cleaning up my extruder all the time. So what I do is I have a handheld extruder that I use, and I'll make like 40, however many handles I can all at once. And I just fill these boxes up. In the bottom of the box is a piece of HardieBacker board, which is wet, and that keeps the handles wet. So I can keep my handles wet for a month or however long I have. And then when I'm running out of handles, I just get out more clay and extrude more. So I'll take one handle out, put it in. So here we go, handle time. So let's go back down to here, right? So we have a handle, and when I always stick the handle on the seam here. So let's take that, that'll come back a little bit. So here I have my handle. Basically, let's look at it. So I'll put the seam so it's right here, right away. And then what I want maybe is a handle that comes out of the side of pot, something like that, I guess. Yeah, that looks okay. So then what I'm going to do is with my handy dandy little tool, so because I want it to come out of like that angle there, I want to cut it right at that angle right there as well. So you see that I put that mark there. That's the angle that that handle is going to interact with the piece right there. That line right there. So what I'm going to do now is cut it off and cut it off at that angle so it matches into that piece perfectly. So here, cut it off. There we go. So that hopefully now if I try to stick that on, it has the right angle. To me that, let's see if we can make that. I think that could work, right? That looks okay. So then this handle is flat right here. It's like boom. But this pot is round. So I like to round these handles off this side. So I'll just take it on the side of the pipe or whatever I got that's round and kind of smoosh it onto the end of this pipe here to kind of round it a little bit. There, so it has a little bit of a roundness there, and that should help it attach a little better. And then, so I'm going to get out my piece of foam. So I use this piece of foam, and I used to use a flat piece of foam. And sometimes I forget, and I use a flat piece of foam. But what used to happen is I put my pot on that flat piece of foam, like this one here, and my pot used to roll away and onto the floor sometimes. So I finally learned my lesson, and I use always this sort of foam. So the pot won't roll away. And then here, I'm going to dip this side in water here. And, there's a question, how do I cut the HardieBacker board? You cut it just like you would cut drywall. So you just score it super hard with a knife, boom, 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 and then you can break it. And it'll snap along that score mark, right? So here, I take this and I dunk this in. So HardieBacker is great. You can see this whole table right here that I work on is all HardieBacker board, right? I got a big one, and I just work off this HardieBacker board, but underneath it, you can see here, it's a wooden board underneath, right? So it's an old wooden work table that I put a giant piece of HardieBacker board on, and that's what I work on, too. And you can get that at any hardware store. So back to my handle, it has a curve, it's prepped, it's ready. I wet this end really good, and I just stick it on there just for a second. I usually go centered right on my seam, and that should leave a little wet mark. Oh, it didn't leave enough of a wet mark. Go again. There, so hopefully you guys can see it. It left a wet mark right there, and that's the area I got to score. This is all like handle 101 stuff, but it's still, you got to remember even the basic lessons, right? We build off even the most basic stuff. So I like to extrude these handles because I think they just look good. So on a thrown pot, I would always, probably for myself, I would always put a thrown or a pulled handle on. But for these hand-built pots, I think these extruded handles look pretty good. And I think the mechanicalness of the extruded handle looks pretty good with the kind of mechanical nature of how round I keep these. And then here I need to score this side. I'm just going to use a score tool for this. Score, score, score. And then we're going to attach this baby on. So when I attach this, oh, I got a goober this side. I forgot to add my goober. Goober. So I got to goober up both sides really well. And I just pop it on there just for a second, just to see if it's looking good. Is it happy in its own existence? If it's not, right, I could always take it off and just say, hey, that's not working. So then when I'm sticking it on, I want to add pressure and wiggle it back and forth in place. Pressure, wiggle, pressure, wiggle, pressure, wiggle. I'm supporting it from the inside. I don't want the cup to collapse. So this cup is a little bit wetter than the way I normally would. Usually I'd let them sit overnight wrapped up, and they'd just be a little bit stiffer than this. There we go. So it's kind of on there. I'll clean up this part here in a second, but I'm just going to eyeball it for a second just to make sure that what I think I'm getting is what I'm getting. So let me see here. So I'm looking at all around because I just don't want it to be off a lot. So it looks like it's not attached really well over here. Doing stuff on camera always is weird and different. Go. So now the handle I think looks a little weak as far as it doesn't have enough hump when it comes up over. So I'm going to just push this end up and hump this over just to give it a little bit more presence. I'm much happier with that. And then I'm going to clean up this edge really quick before it dries. So maybe I'll use my sponge on a stick because I can get that in there really efficiently, right? We talked about this already. My high-tech, super high-tech tool, sponge on a stick. There we go. Then for this crack up here, what I will do, this little space, it's hard, I can't get my sponge on a stick in there. I'll use a little itty bitty brush if I can find one. Where's the itty bitty brush when you want one? Here. Nope, not itty bitty enough. So I'll use a small brush and I'll just wipe that clean from right in there. Whoop. There we go. And then let's attach this bottom part. So here, same rule applies here. I want to cut this off at an angle that matches the angle it needs to attach. So what does that mean? So I'm going to cut this off at that angle right there. So here, like this, I'll just come and draw toward myself here. So this blade is super dull. It's not a sharp blade. This is a Dolan tool. It's amazing. I love this one. There we go. So slice that baby off. There and there. And then so you see how that attachment, it's going to flop when it just naturally just wants to flop and attach. There's a little bit, so I was off a little bit with my angle. You see how there's a little bit of a gap there. So if I cut it perfectly, that's what I would want it to cut perfectly flat, but that sort of give should be okay. If I really need to, I can cut a little bit more off of this outside here. See if that works a little better. All right, so there, and then I can just, I'm going to push it down just for a second, just to kind of get it to be round, just to make sure. And then once again, I'm going to look all the way around really fast, just to make sure something's not messed up. All right, so let's attach it on. So goober from slip, attaching slip. Goober, that's, I don't bother scoring this part usually. This part almost never cracks off. Seemingly okay. Seemingly okay. So let's attach it. So I'm going to walk it up a little. I think that's a little low for me. There we go. Let's attach it down. I'm going to push back from the inside because this cup is so soft. I'm going to add some pressure back from this side. There we go. Ooh, there's a little bit of a gap. You can see, I guess it's too big for me to get in there. So I'm going to have to use a smaller brush. Oh, I could use this. I can use my special brush that I was using for cleaning. So I'm just going to add a little bit more slip in there because it looks a little dry. I'm going to goober some more. I'm just really going to goober it up. Just jam some slip in there. Get me some slip in there. There. So there's some slip. I goobered it in, and I'm just going to see if I can just kind of wiggle. I'm pushing down, wiggling back and forth with my hand to try to get it to stick down. There we go. Look at that. Oh, baby. That's looking really good. So I got to actually push back from the inside. I could feel the clay collapsing from back there, so I'm pushing down as I go. So normally this doesn't happen. Like normally when this clay is a little bit stiffer, it attaches much better. There we go. So there, so that's looking pretty good, that attachment. And then I'll come back. I guess I got to get a new clean little brush because I used my clean little brush already. Okay, so we'll use this fan brush, and I can just clean up that extra slip with this fan brush here. There we go. Clean, 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 clean. There we go. That's looking okay. So then there's a little bit of this. I should have picked a different handle because this handle's all beat up. So here. So these handles, when I extrude them, they're all, for me, I need them to be about 7 inches long. And that just works out perfect. So you can see that I hardly cut any extra material off. So I'll do that later off screen so that you guys aren't around. So the last thing I do is, there's just still a little bit more cleanup to do on this, but I'll probably wait for it to set up a little. And then I need my chop, which I don't seem to have. I had it out. All right, so I have a chop that I would normally put on there. Give me a second. All right, my chop got buried somewhere, but normally I would put my chop down right there like that on the handles, the finishing touch. All right, so do you guys have any questions? All right, thank you for joining today. If you have any comments, you can always write comments in the comments section. You can share, you can do all that stuff. I'll reply to you. Great. All right. All right, Alex. I'm glad you could have joined us. Woo! There we go. So this is looking pretty good. Oh, and always the last thing I do before I stop messing around with it for the day is I always go back and re-round. So the non-round, for it becoming non-round is like my biggest worry, right? So this, I always come back and keep rounding it. So I'll probably let this sit out for like an hour and then probably then come back and re-round it again. Okay, there we go. So that's looking, so the roundness, it looks pretty round. I'm pretty excited about that, right? And I'll just come back and keep doing that, and it's almost done, right? So I'll let it stiffen up because it's a little bit wet for me to finish off everything I want to do. But normally this would be the last time I really touch it, other than coming by every once in a while and re-rounding it. But you can see that it's fitting with what I want to do, and I'm using that stamp the way how I want to use it. All right, thanks everybody for joining. Woohoo! If you have any questions, write them in the comment section. I'll respond.